If you've ever considered buying an apartment, this video is made for you. Because I really can't stand it. There are so many options in Australia, yet it's us Chinese who keep getting tricked into buying apartments. So this video has been watched by over 50,000 people online, but what I didn't expect is that the question I get asked the most is, why can't we buy apartments? So today's video is definitely going to offend even more people because I'm going to break it down for you in detail and explain exactly what happens when you buy an apartment. So does that mean you absolutely shouldn't buy an apartment? Not necessarily. There's only one type of person for whom buying an apartment is suitable, and I'll explain that at the end. Whether you're a first-time home buyer, a new investor, or parents thinking of helping your child buy, you really need to pay attention and listen, because I believe I can help you avoid losing 700,000 Australian dollars. Alright, let's take a look. Suppose there is a $700,000 apartment on the market, a $700,000 unit, and a $700,000 house. Whether you're buying to live in or as an investment, what would happen if you bought one of these? Let's say you buy an apartment, right? 700,000. Many people don't realize that when you buy an apartment, even if the rental yield is higher if you rent it out, the ongoing maintenance cost is actually very high, especially for newer apartments. You might need to set aside about 10,000 Australian dollars each year for things like the sauna and swimming pool upstairs. Here we're calculating over 10 years. If it's 10,000 a year, then over 10 years, maintaining the apartment will cost 100,000 Australian dollars. Apartments in Australia also have a unique trait. They don't appreciate in value. For example, if an apartment was 700,000 10 years ago, it's still 700,000 today. And what will it be in 10 years? 700,000, unless it's an apartment with scarcity value. That's another story. For example, in Melbourne, if you have an apartment overlooking the Australian Open tennis courts, or in Sydney, if you can see the Harbour Bridge, those are exceptions. So what happens after 10 years? Honestly, it's almost like nothing is left. It's still only worth 700,000 after 10 years, plus you've put in another 100,000. If you lived there and then sold, you could only get 600,000, so you've actually lost 100,000. What's even scarier? We'll talk about this in a moment. If you bought a unit, after 10 years it could be worth close to $1 million. If you bought a house, after 10 years it could become 1.38 million. If today you bought an apartment because you felt you couldn't afford a house, I think that's a real tragedy. After all, how many 10 years does a person have in their life? What kind of situation will you end up in? It's that if you can't afford it today, you'll be even less able to afford it 10 years from now, and maybe you'll never be able to afford it in your lifetime. I'm really not trying to scare you here. If after seeing this you still want to buy an apartment, I strongly suggest you look up the appreciation trends in the Australian property market to verify what I'm saying. Think twice before you act. Or if you watch until the end, I'll also talk about what kind of people are actually suited to buying an apartment. Now let's talk about the second scenario, which might be somewhere in between. Because with a $700,000 unit or townhouse, except in Sydney, you can still buy one within about a half-hour drive from the city centre in other capital cities. So what will happen if you buy a unit? Because units are generally smaller, if you really want to buy a unit, try to choose one with a larger area, since older people like units, and when you sell to them in the future, there will still be appreciation in value. It should be at least 200 square meters, and ideally closer to 300 square meters. With a unit, you don't really have a backyard, so maintenance costs are lower. It's a strata property, so buy a strata-titled unit, not a company-titled one. Maintenance costs are usually about 1,000 Australian dollars per year, so over 10 years, that's 10,000. For a unit, after 10 years, if you buy for 700,000 now, it could increase to around 1 million. If the land is larger, the value could be higher. After deducting the 10,000 you spent on maintenance, in the end, you'll have about 990,000. Maybe you've watched my videos and learned that apartments aren't worth buying, but houses might really be too far away for you. Except for Sydney. Everything is expensive in Sydney. So if you suddenly need to move, it's still possible to find a good unit or townhouse. This is doable. Because if you buy a unit or townhouse, as long as your income grows faster than property prices over the next 10 years, there's still a chance you'll be able to upgrade to a house in the future. So what's the ideal situation? If you can work from home and your job or active income isn't tied to a specific location, then by all means, go for a house, ideally one that's over 600 square meters. You can also check out my other videos which help you choose areas or explain what kind of house, what kind of land will appreciate faster. But in any case, as long as you buy a house, its appreciation is basically stronger than the other two. Let's continue. But houses have drawbacks. What are they? Maintenance costs are high because a backyard means more potential issues like water leaks that can cost hundreds to fix. We estimate about $2,000 a year, totaling $20,000 over 10 years. But this is all just small stuff. Why? Normally, in any city, house prices double in 10 years. Suppose you buy a 600 square meter plot for 1.4 million. Since it's your main home, you don't pay capital gains tax when you sell. So if you buy a house, After 10 years, that house will be worth about 1.38 million after deducting your maintenance costs. Now I realize I wrote a wrong character myself. Actually, this isn't profits. Here it should be the price after 10 years minus the money you spent on maintenance. So 70,000 becomes 60,000. All right, let's take a look. If you bought an apartment, what would your actual loss be after 10 years? Or in other words, what is the cost of buying an apartment? Let's suppose we have a time machine and we travel 10 years into the future. You'll find that your apartment is 39,000 cheaper than the unit you could have bought for 700,000 back then. And compared to a house that was also 700,000 10 years ago, there's a difference of 780,000. That's pretty shocking. What does a difference of 780,000 over 10 years mean? Listen carefully, that's a difference of 78,000 Australian dollars per year. What does 78,000 Australian dollars really mean? An adult's pre-tax income might be about 110 to 120,000, assuming you don't spend a cent, which is impossible, right? But let's say someone is so extreme that they don't eat or drink, only then could they save up 78,000 Australian dollars. And all of that could be wiped out by a single decision you made back then. That's a truly terrifying thought. So this leads to the conclusion that only one type of person is suited to buying an apartment, someone who has so much money that they simply don't care about that 78,000. Whether you're a first-generation wealthy individual who considers 78,000 a year just pocket change, or a second-generation rich kid whose parents transfer you 50 or 70,000 at a time, this amount of money simply doesn't matter to you. In that case, you can go ahead and buy. Otherwise, for now, just rent an apartment. Some people might also ask, what if I know I really shouldn't buy an apartment, but I truly can't afford a house either? What should I do? Follow me first, and in 7 days I'll post a video called What is Rent Investing? Actually, there's another approach. You can rent an apartment near your workplace in your city, let your landlord take on the heavy burden, while you yourself pick a city that's on an upward trend or a place you believe in and buy a house there. Then, try your best to rent it out so that the rental yield is positive. For example, in Melbourne, you could do what our team does. Buy for $700,000 and add a granny flat and you could get $900 a week in rent, right? So basically, once you put down the deposit, your money will rise along with the overall market. But what happens if you do rent investing? You leveraged your landlord's property by renting their apartment, while you yourself invested in a house in another city. 10 years later, your landlord's apartment has depreciated, but the house you invested in has appreciated and even doubled in value. This is a pretty good approach, but if you don't understand rent investing, you should be careful, okay? Wait for my video to come out first. I don't expect anything from you for today's sharing. If you find this helpful, I only hope you'll give it a like and share it with people around you who might need it.